hardest part of the summit was even before it started.
Okay, so
we put out a registration of interest a couple of months ago, and we got 600 people who applied. And I remember when I finally closed the registration of interest, my heart really broke because, from the get-go, I knew I want to bring all the sisters together, but we don't have, nobody has given us those kinds of resources to. So very quickly started thinking about how do we then optimize with the resources we have, bring some people physically together, but make sure that those who registered are also able to tune in virtually.
Okay.
So I hope that they did tune in through the live streams. We make sure we had a live stream in English and in French to bring in our sisters who were not here physically with us in Accra to know that it's not, it doesn't stop just because we haven't met. It doesn't mean they're not valid and not counted. And just spent the morning so far just looking at the hashtag in all the platforms and soaking in the fact that it happened. It happened.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Oh man, yeah. It's still policy. I think for us, why we do the summit is to underline the fact that in a world of technology where everything's so much about entrepreneurship and innovation and the next or new tech fad or exciting thing, like if it's today it's a blockchain, last year it was open data and all that, there are some undercurrents that we must keep paying attention to. And so bringing in, it was, I would say this year, we went deeper into help people crystallize the whole idea of policy. I really liked that one of the first sessions helped us framed and I think it was you actually who brought up the thing about how we make policy exciting. It's true. The documents or the processes that we are first introduced to policy through are very boring and very rigid. But everything, as somebody rightfully pointed out, has a policy implication. How we end up being educated, or how we end up even with little things about that seem ordinary or benign and then have become the norm, and then suddenly it's what government invests in, is how policy is shaped. I think somebody said policy is when you're sleeping. So I think this year, what we did is it also tied to some of the work we do outside of the summit, especially with the Women's Rights Online Network, which we say is a REACT, which means it's an angle that has to do with rights. Online and offline rights, human rights basically, and how those are crystallized, not just written on paper or in constitutions. I think the other thing that was really interesting is every country represented, somebody said, it's not that those laws don't exist on paper, it's the implementation. So how do you actually make the language of rights active and is normative and is not just something that exists on a piece of paper and it's not what people live with. So, and that's just one angle. And you could have a whole summit on rights alone, right? And then you have education and skills and how people, perceptions of what it means to be digitally literate or what it means to be a woman in tech. I really appreciated that conversation and being able to find women who are like, well, it's not necessarily because I learned how to code or necessarily because I'm an engineer. It's something that just angered me, and technology became a tool through which I could do that. You're a woman in tech because this is what you're doing. You're using new technologies to continue producing journalism and content and shape the rules of the game or reshape them. You're a woman in tech. And so that's what we were thinking with education. Affordable access remained one of those topics that came because it's really the takeoff. If people cannot afford the devices and to remain online, they're missing out on everything else we're talking about. Content, what we're doing here is creating content. That was a really strong anchor. And I think the summit started in a way with the idea of what governments do and how they monitor progress. And for us in the REACT framework, we call that targets. So that's how we go about it. And I think this year's summit was really about showing people, at least in our way, how we think about how all these issues tie together to make sure women and girls, and truly all people on the continent, are able to reap the dividends of the digital economy. I'll even try and make it sound like something beautiful. Look, we are half the population of this globe, and a combination of factors has made it such that we can't just assume even in this age of disruptive technologies, you will just build it and it will come. For us, it's very clear from the get-go that through the numbers we started seeing, women were already being left behind during the takeoff.
Yeah.
And we needed to start finding ways to counter how people are investing in technology or how they're thinking about technology's impact on society. And if we get them to understand that it's not neutral, it's not an equal opportunity factor, because there are other factors that are compounded, we might start getting a more responsive and appropriate and adaptable sense of policy making and investment. And by focusing specifically on women as a collective, and this, by the way, is, we say women, but it's also understanding that we are not a homogeneous group. There are persons with disabilities, there are older women, there are younger women, there are women in rural areas, women in urban areas who are poor, all those demographics, sub-demographics that we are very aware of. But by collectively having not just a process, but a program that we actively seek resources and support for, the hope is that if 51% of the population finally starts being recognized, we can start showing amongst the 51% the very specific issues that they face, and that they can be counted and considered in policies and in investments and in actually closing these inequalities, doing away with inequalities, hopefully in our lifetime. One of the commitments we as Web Foundation made was definitely the second summit and hosting it.
Okay.
And that has happened.
Biannual or every 2 years?
Biannual, every 2 years.
Okay.
Now there's a very interesting problem, good problem, where everyone wants it next year, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a really good problem.
We have to go and do a little AGM and see if that's what we will be able to. As of yesterday, the demands was already, I was about to be forced to give a date, but we'll see.
We had to watch.
The other thing, one of the other key commitments was on this notion of building a movement. And I think for me, yesterday, the closing, and looking back at the room, I realized.
And then you were tearing.
The movement was there, and for me, it was just, it's worth it. You know, like, sometimes you can get lost in the process of planning and the logistics of everything, and then you forget
the essence.
And I saw it in that room in that moment, and it just, that, you know, that vibration, positive vibration, all just came back, and I was like, yep. So the movement is there. I mean, people left there with the whole WhatsApp group. This will be the most ambitious WhatsApp group I've ever come across. It's perhaps the first Pan-African, truly Pan-African WhatsApp group.
Across the continent.
It's a movement. So
and it started before the summit ended.
And exactly, and part of also this summit itself was a mix of people who were there in 2016, new people, people listening in virtually. I think the movement continues to grow and to be built. And the work is on all of us. We were just a catalyst. Another key action plan, or that was in the action plan rather, was this idea of scaling initiatives. And we discussed that a lot here, especially in yesterday, where we told especially a lot of partners, people who fund work in this game, please don't just fund pilots. Start thinking about the pipeline, start thinking about the ecosystem. Don't just box women into the SME bubble or into this little nice, we want to dream big, and we want to not take over the world, but really does fix the world to work for everybody. To do that, we need resources that are supporting us in the big scale, not just the little pilots. And part of that was also us challenging the partners who even supported us in 2016, many of whom thankfully came on board again for 2018 summit, and that continuing that movement. So that has been going on our end. And other partners did commit to various other elements. So for us now is to go back to that particular action plan and maybe just update it, because I think those are tried and tested truths. Build, and the other one that I really loved was build with women, not for women. You know, that I think has continued to resound. So this, I think, the action plan by women. Oh yes, those all build. Don't build for women. Build with women, and let it be by women. And I loved the conversation yesterday about even our own coding languages and such. I think that was a brilliant, like, opening up of minds on what's possible. So I think it continues to be, and we just maybe pepper it. And I think this time it will be up to all delegates to think about how to crowdsource it and how to keep that. If today the table was, rather the question was flipped, and like, what are the 4 things you feel must be carried on going forward. So we'll be sending that to people with the 2016 plan and get their view on that and see. It's a living document, right? That we all look up one day when it's 2019 and you feel like, I just need to remember a moment when I was with the sisterhood, and it's there. And I think that's the whole idea of the action plan. I mean, and these are the age-old questions, even outside the field of tech. I think it's the question every woman who's trying to disrupt the status quo faces. What's your support network like? And support networks can be in a familial setting. I think we already have familial settings where we were able to leave whatever else we have at home as responsibilities to come all the way to Accra for 3 days. Somebody somewhere in our setting is supporting our being away in a way. So that support network, you keep it that way. This network, in my view, and the vision on why I gladly labor for it, is the conversations people have had, or the names they've seen, or just seeing. I love one key outcome, I think, now for me with the summit is a statement everybody kept saying: they've never been in a room with that many women in technology. It was said so many times, and it's huge. It tells you a lot. That memory for everybody, knowing that I'm not alone, and so actively, the work then begins to actively seek out people. I need your insight on this, I need your that, or using the hashtag and somebody telling you, don't you dare give up, you know. I think there's the work ahead between now and when we meet again, and again, even when we do, not necessarily all of us will come, is to actively cultivate something in that moment. So that has to come from each and every one of us. It cannot be the responsibility of an organization or any one individual. It's just that I know that I'm in Lagos and I need to cover something, and I know Lami has got it, you know. Or you're in Lagos and you know you met some few more people from Lagos or elsewhere in Nigeria, and just saying, okay, it's our country context, let's huddle, let's do that. The work ahead is incumbent on all of us to figure out when and where to be smart to activate that and seek that support or insights. I love that people were like, well, we'll share the resources we have, we'll put, you know, what we've used to see whether, you know, networks and people connecting. That, I think, is a support network in a professional sense. As for the fact that some of us will never meet again, and the fact that keeping networks alive is never easy, even though technology is supposed to have made it easier. It's just I think it's a humbling reminder that it takes the intrinsic human motivation. There's no app we will build now that will keep us constantly on that tempo. It's just the truth. And even if that WhatsApp group peters out, 2 people connecting for me who had never connected is enough. People who are like, this is the first time they've left their country to come to Ghana and then be in that energy is enough. Their country at all. I wish I had like a little something that would have been there when I was having these conversations to record them, but now they're etched in my memory, and I have to keep them, bringing them back alive when I seek strength to do this over and over and over again. So the work is on each of us to see, we were here, we did it, what am I going to build with it? How many people am I going to carry with me? There's an array of 250 women. How many will that be possible to continue with? And it's always very tricky, and these are conversations we continue having. But I know and I hope that whenever people go back and look up, for instance, Tech Women Africa, that little memory the spark will come back, and maybe somebody will write to me and Lami will be like, what was the name of the person who said this? And I'm like, I hope I remember who it was. And I go and I'm like, here you go. In fact, I've spent the last 12 or so hours connecting people, like email that this. You said you wanted to, and just making sure. That's been my little thing, like, keep it going, don't just tell me you want to talk to so and so. I have your image, I have yours, I put them together. So hopefully that's how it will go. So there never really answers, there's no app we're going to build for it. It's really our intrinsic motivation to make it happen. Wow, I mean, because women, everybody should have it's first of all, everyone must embrace technology as a mindset, as not just technologies as they already exist to consume, but the idea of even dreaming to build the technologies, even the ones in the world, if you see they're not enough, you have a right to imagine that you can recreate and reimagine, because that's how these technologies have come to be. It is your right. It is the reason for your being, to be able to create. Sometimes we do get caught up in thinking that technology is a mobile phone, or technology is the things we're already seeing as finished products. But as somebody rightfully said during the summit, is the passions we have within us. We know, and especially in this case, people who are in this loosely termed global south, developing world, we know the pain points. We know what can start making life better for our communities or our societies or our countries. So that thinking about that, and then looking at all the things that are becoming possible in the world of technology and appropriating them for your context, is a fundamental right. And that's the only pitch I can ever make for why people should embrace technology. I'm not going to tell you it's because it makes it easier to move from here to there. That's very narrow-minded and tunnel vision. And sure, if I can hail a cab on demand, it's great. It makes my life easier than haggling for a fee, negotiating, and that's fine. But at a fundamental, mind-opening, the world is your oyster kind of thing, it is because we are the ones best placed to do that. The work of building technology, the work of solving the world, is not just for some people to do in certain parts or corners of the world. It is everybody's right. And parting words, just man, it happened. It happened. 2018 Summit Tech Women Africa. From what everyone has said is a success. I'm still processing.
Yeah, it is a real success.
But it did, and I'm thankful so much for every woman who brought their best possible self, for everybody who supported, for everybody whose door Onika and I knocked on and they said yes, and the teams and the people who made it possible. It's happened, and I think a spark was lit here. It may dim sometimes, but it will not die out as easily, and so cheers to that.